Hello everyone. I'm doing good. Thank you so much for asking. Thank you so much for joining. Today's session is going to be conducted completely in English, so please feel free to leave any comments and I will definitely answer all of your questions after this session, right? And also would really appreciate if you could let me know right now in comments what kind of score you are trying to pursue in your test, right? And maybe what schools you would like to apply to very soon. That would be really great to know. Apart from that, I think that we will start in a couple of minutes, right? Right on time. So let's try to, introduce ourselves to each other. That would be great. I hope, guys, that you can hear me well and see me well. Just let me know in comments if everything is fine. And we're gonna start in a couple of minutes. Okay, sounds good. All right, so I think that it's time. Let me introduce myself. My name is Alina, and I'm going to conduct this online session today about writing task 1 in your IELTS test. And I'm really happy to be here, and I hope that you will enjoy this session. And as I said, please feel free to leave any questions or comments right in the live chat, and I would be able to answer them once I finish, okay? All right, so let's start. And as I said, the topic of our today's session is writing task 1. And in particular, we will start from different general strategies and how to crack and succeed in writing task 1. And then I would definitely explain to you how to write a really good line graph and how to describe it properly in order to get really nice score in IELTS tests. So as you know, your writing section in the IELTS exam is going to consist of 2 writing tasks, right? And it will take you 1 hour. So in particular today, we're going to focus on writing task 1, right? And this is your first task, which you will start your writing section from. Let's move on. And right here, I would like to explain to you different general strategies and, of course, administrative part of this task. So your timing, right, as I said, will be 1 hour in general for the whole section, while for writing task 1, you definitely need to spend 20 minutes only. This is not that much time, I would say, right? So that's why we definitely should be sure, right, what kind of strategies to apply. The first strategy to apply and to start from, of course, is to identify, so what type of a graph you're going to describe, because the main idea of writing task 1 is to describe some sort of information presented to you in different types of graphs. So that's why right here, you can see that I kind of numbered for you different types of graphs, right, which you might receive in your IELTS test, because there are plenty of them and there are different types of them. And the first strategy you need to start from is to identify it, right? Before we get into those types, I would like to mention that the number of words which you definitely need to pursue in your writing task 1 is minimum 150, right? But this is your minimum number. So you should make sure that in order to get really better score, you should start from 160 to 180 words. It's a recommended number of words, which would definitely help you describe more details, more figures, right? And summarize more ideas from the graph, right? So that's very important. But of course, in case if you don't have a chance, right, to write 160 words, right, just maybe because the graph was quite complicated, right, or maybe your level of English is not that high. So it means that the only thing you gotta do here to definitely pass this part is to write 150 words. If you reach the minimum, it means that your score is not going to be lower. So that's definitely a good approach to start from. Right now, I would definitely move to the types, right? So as I said, you need to identify the type, right? The most popular type of writing task 1 is a line graph. And that's why today we're going to focus more on this sample. And I'm going to show you the vocabulary, right? And the way how we describe line graphs. The second popular type is a bar chart, or we also call it a bar graph. By the way, this is the only type which we might paraphrase this way. For example, you cannot paraphrase line graph into a line chart. That wouldn't be really correct in terms of your language. So please make sure that it's possible only with bar charts or bar graphs, right? That's why you can see two options on the screen. Another very interesting type is a pie chart, right? It's a very typical one as well. And right there, you definitely need to work with percentages. I will show that to you in a second visually. Also, you might get tables. That's very possible. And I will explain to you in a second what kind of strategy to apply there. We also have flow charts and processes. But process, this is some sort of a diagram. Again, in a second, I will show it to you visually. And of course, we have maps. So you can see there are so many types, right, of graphs. And you should make sure that you identify them once you start writing your first paragraph. Okay, this is pretty much it when it comes to the first strategy. And I would love to move on to the next part, right? And that's exactly what I was talking about. I would love to go through all those types visually, right? Because maybe some of you never experienced describing graphs. So I want to make sure that you would be able to identify them. Sometimes in your test, you might be very lucky and you might get the title where actually the type of your graph is already indicated, like here. For example, here they're already saying that this is a line graph, and that's really fortunate, right? But sometimes it's not going to be indicated this way, and you might just get the word the graph or the chart, meaning that you need to identify this graph, right, or this diagram yourself. Okay, so this is very important, and that's why I started from that strategy. So yeah, this is definitely a very typical idea of how a line graph looks like. So you would definitely would be able to see the lines, right? And your main task is to describe those changes in those lines, right? And we will talk about that through the sample in detail, okay? Another very popular type, as I already mentioned, is a bar chart or a bar graph. You can see it right here. So the main idea is that you will get different bars right here. What's really tricky about bar chart is that sometimes those bars might be vertical, and this is very typical, right? That's what we got used to. But sometimes students also receive a bar graph where the bars are located horizontally. And this is also a bar chart. So please don't be confused if the bars are located in a little bit different way. If you receive bars, it still means that this is a bar chart, and your task is to try your best to describe it, okay? Let's move on to the next slide. And right here, we're getting into pie charts, okay? And this is a very interesting example of pie charts. And this is another trick, I would say, in your IELTS test. So sometimes it's not necessarily true that you will get just only one pie chart like this, right? So you should make sure that apart from identifying that this is a pie chart, but again, you're quite lucky here because you have it in your title, but still, here you have 3 pie charts. So our main task, for example, here would be to make sure that we at least describe something from every single pie chart. Because if you miss at least one pie chart, it means that you didn't cover the information in full, and you might lose some points, okay? So please make sure that you cover all of the graphs or diagrams or pie charts, right, which are given to you. This is quite important. Let's move on to this picture, and right here you can see the table. Well, it's super easy, right, to identify the table, I'm sure, but it's not very easy to understand how to describe it sometimes, because sometimes you cannot see too many changes in the table, right? Because it's not a very visual way how we can, place the information, right? So what I would recommend you to do with tables is that you definitely need to make sure that you kind of take some notes on your table, especially if you take a paper-based test, right, in IELTS. So for example, here, what I would do, I would definitely take some notes and draw some arrows which show the direction of how these numbers were actually changing. So I can see, for example, an upward trend, right, or maybe downward trend, right? So I can kind of visually help myself, right, to show how numbers decrease or how numbers actually increase, right? So this is the way how we work with tables. Please feel free to take some notes on your table, especially if you take a paper-based test, right? Well, if it's a computer-based test, then just make sure that you kind of try to visualize, right, how those numbers are changing, because that's exactly the main thing which you need to kind of describe in any graph, not only in tables, right? So the only challenge here is that you do not see visually the way how those numbers or figures actually change in, right? So that's why this strategy for tables would definitely work. So keep it in mind, please. Let's move on to the next slide. And right here, I would like to present to you another type of a graph. And this is a very interesting one because a lot of students make like a common mistake, right? That this is like some sort of a diagram, right? But it's not. This type, right, with many arrows and boxes, right? That's how I call them. This is a flow chart. So please keep in mind, if you receive something like that, right, it means that this is a flow chart. Okay, how to identify it? As I already said, you will see some sort of a process consisting of different stages, and those stages will be placed in different boxes, right? Kind of coming one from another. So this is the way how the flow chart looks like. So please make sure that you identify it correctly. Okay, this is not kind of a diagram. Okay, this is a flow chart. However, if we move on to this picture, right, we will definitely see a diagram, right? And this diagram describes a process, and that's exactly the difference, right, between a flow chart and this diagram, right? So how to identify that this is definitely a diagram, apart from the word located here, right? So obviously, your process visually will consist of different pictures, how this process was actually made up. And this is the idea here. So you can see the process of how the matches were actually produced. And they literally present this information to you with pictures, right? So this is why this is definitely a diagram. And your main task here would be to describe a process presented on this diagram and how, let's say, in this particular case, matches were made. Okay, so keep in mind that if you have pictures, right, and those pictures also represent some sort of a process, right, or steps and stages, it means that that's definitely a diagram describing a process, while this is a flow chart. Okay, so this is quite important to identify. Okay, let's move on to another type. And right here, we can see maps, right? Maps is a very interesting, I would say, type of a graph, right? Because first of all, it's also quite visual because it's some sort of a picture, right? Where you can see different locations, and your main task is to describe those locations and those changes in locations, right? So usually the trick which you need to be ready for in maths is that you would definitely receive most likely either 2 maps or 3 maps as it is right here. Why? Because it's quite difficult to just describe a map because there are no numbers or figures there, but locations, right? So that's why in order you to compare some sort of information, usually the IELTS test will suggest to you at least 2 maps where, for example, you can see the location in the past and the location in the present time, right? Or maybe in the future, depending on your task, right? Yet again. Or you might probably receive 3 maps, as I decided to put it right here, where you will be presented with absolutely different periods of time. For example, you see here 1960, 1980, and 2000, and they are very different, right? So our main trick is that you definitely need to make sure, again, that you cover at least something from every single map, right? The challenge in this particular task, and that's why I decided to put it into this presentation, is the fact that you cannot, for example, combine this period of time. For example, you cannot say that this map kind of presents the period of time from 1960 to 2000. That would be wrong. Why? Because, well, you don't have any maps which present 1970 or 1990, right? This information is missing. So it would be really wrong if you kind of try to combine it in one time frame, okay? So please make sure if you receive something like that and the time period is quite separated, it means that you need separately present and describe those maps, and probably try to compare them, of course, because we're kind of considering the same locations here, right? But you should make sure that you include 3 of them. So this is the trick here. Another final type, I would say, which you might get, is that sometimes it's not only the same type of a graph, like here. For example, here it's only maps, and you can see 3 of them. While here, you can see that they present definitely 2 different types. In this type, we call a combined type or multiple graphs, right? It means that, for example, you need to describe here a pie chart, and you also need to describe a table right here. And that's exactly where the situation with identifying the graphs work perfectly well. Why? Because you see that in your task, they are telling you that you need to kind of describe diagrams. But you need to prove to the examiner that you understand what types of diagrams or graphs they are. So you should start from saying the pie chart and the table. You need to identify them straight away. What's really interesting about a combined type is that, well, first of all, again, you need to cover, of course, all of the types provided to you. But another very tricky thing here is that sometimes students try to, search for some sort of similarities, right? Like similar things, let's say in a pie chart and in the table, and they fail because they can't, for example, find anything, because it is not necessarily true that the examiner wants you to find similarities, okay? So sometimes you might be provided with 2 absolutely different types of graphs, and your task is just to try your best to describe them, okay? But it doesn't mean that you need to desperately compare them, okay? Because you might waste a lot of time, right? While you are trying to, to find those similarities while they're just absent, okay? So please make sure that if you were not able to find any similarities straight away, because usually they are very obvious, they're very remarkable. So if you cannot find them, it means that you just need to go ahead and describe separately the suggested to you types of graphs, okay? And that's basically it, what you need to do here. Great, so that's basically it. So all those visual types of graphs were provided to you. I hope that now it's clear how they look like, right, and what you need to do with them. And now I would like us to move on to the next part. And this part is a structure, of course, right? Because sometimes, even though you know what type of a graph is in front of you, you might be really lost what you need to start from, right? And as in any essay, writing task 1 is also not an exception, and you need to have some sort of a structure in your mind, right? So let's start from this plan. First of all, writing task 1 is a little bit different from writing task 2 or from any other academic types of essays, right? Especially if you describe like an issue or a problem, when usually we have an introduction, body part, and conclusion, right? Here in writing task 1, your structure will be a little bit different, okay? And I want us to start from paragraph by paragraph, right? And the way how we start is actually not very different. It's also an introduction. But the key idea in writing task 1 is that you never provide any personal opinions. You never try to express your point of view, okay, or try to make some sort of conclusion based on your knowledge, right? Professional or academic knowledge, it doesn't matter. You just need to describe exactly what is given to you. Okay, so that's why we start from our introduction. And our introduction, of course, will be just only one paragraph, but in particular, to be honest with you, this is going to be most likely one sentence, but a very complex one, okay? So how do we approach an introduction in your writing task 1? So as I said, you will start from identifying your graph, and you literally start your sentence from this, right? So let's say the pie chart, right? We identified it, good. Next, we move on to the idea that we need to rephrase or say, in other words, the task or the title which was given to you. And this is very important. If you copy something what was given in the title, you're definitely going to lose some points. So please make sure that you paraphrase the task which was given to you. Usually your task will be put in one sentence, and that's why I said that your introduction will be quite short in writing task 1, because you just need to paraphrase literally one sentence, okay? But it's also important to make sure that you use the correct vocabulary for it, okay? So usually when you would like to say that, let's say this pie chart, right, kind of presents something, right? So the idea of present or demonstrate, right, should be expressed correctly. Okay, and here in the kind of strategy bullet point number 3, I'm showing to you the best way what you need to use. Okay, I would recommend you to start from highlight the data or show the information. Those are the most secure, I would say, ways how you can talk about graphs, you know, presenting some sort of information. Because sometimes it might be very confusing. You might receive a line graph, right? But if you say that the line graph illustrates something, it means that your line graph is a picture, but it's not. It's just data arranged in a picture, okay? So illustrate would not be a really good option there. While, for example, a process or a map, those are definitely pictures. And I kind of mentioned that already when I visually showed you those graphs, right? So that's why I here try to kind of give you an understanding that illustrate is a great word, but it's used for describing maps or processes which kind of contain pictures, right? Remember that picture with the process of making matches, okay? So that would be a great option there because those are visual pictures. While when it comes to the data presented in bar charts, pie charts, tables, what else? Line graphs, right? Then it would be more secure to start from highlight the data or show the information again, depending on what title was given to you. For example, if in your title, they already used the word data, well, obviously it would be better to replace it with information. That's why I show you here 2 options how to do that. Let's get into an example because I think it would make more sense to you, right? So let's say that your task was the pie chart shows the amount of money that a children's charity located in the USA spent and received in 1 year, right? So we're quite lucky here. We understand that this is a pie chart given to us, right? So it's identified, but then you see that they use the word show. So that's why, for example, my option with show the information would be a bit repetitive. So what I would do, I would replace it with highlight the data. Okay, and because this is a pie chart, right? So this is not a map, this is not some sort of a picture, right? Or a process. That's why I'm using highlights the data, and I'm not trying to include illustrate there. Okay, right after that, my next strategy, of course, is to make sure that I paraphrase my title, right? And that's exactly what I'm doing. Usually in the pie charts, we use percentages, right? And that's why I'm trying to replace the amount of money with the percentage of money. Okay, and I'm saying that it highlights the data about the percentage of money. So I replaced this word, right? Then right here, for example, they are getting into that a children's charity located in the USA. Well, you always can replace it with an object relative clause, which starts from which, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm trying to change my grammar structure a little bit, right? And to show that I know relative clauses. And I put after the percentage of money, which, and then if in my task, the USA was a place, right? Like the location. Here, I'm trying to use the USA as some sort of a location, but in a complex noun. That's why I'm saying which the USA Children's Charity Company spent and obtained annually. So the USA Children's Charity Company, it's a complex noun now, right? So we don't have a particular location as it was in your task, right? And of course, you do not need to replace every single word. For example, I'm keeping spent, and that's fine, right? But I definitely know that there are a lot of options how to paraphrase the word receive, which means get or obtain. Obtain, it's a more academic option, and it's IELTS vocabulary. So I recommend you to use that word instead of get, but get would be also perfect to use. But of course, in the appropriate tense, grammar tense, right? And I'm replacing in 1 year with annually, which means the same. Again, annually, this is something more academic, and that's considered to be IELTS vocabulary as well. So basically, you see that the only things I did is that I indicated my type of a graph, right? I used the proper way how to talk about data. Then I paraphrased, but I paraphrased it in both senses, grammatically, right? And we already discussed that, right? And also in a sense of my language and vocabulary, closer to the IELTS level, right? This is exactly what you need to do with your introduction. And as you notice, this is only 1 sentence, right? And it's very clear here. Okay. I suggest us to move on to the next paragraph, which you definitely need to complete. And that's exactly the moment when writing task 1 differs from writing task 2 or from any, academic essays, right? Considering the fact that this is data, right? And it's quite analytical, right? You need to compare, you need to describe figures, numbers, percentages. You should make sure that you analyze information, right? But how to analyze information if you cannot kind of include your personal opinions or something like that? You need to summarize it. And this is one of the key strategies in writing task 1. And for this purpose, you need to arrange a separate paragraph. And we call this paragraph an overview or a summary, if you don't mind. And you need to dedicate 1 paragraph to that. So this paragraph literally goes after your introduction. You should summarize the most important points after your introduction. Sometimes some books and some tutors kind of, especially from some different British centers, right? They kind of suggest to put overview after your body part, but for a better score, it would be definitely more appropriate to put your summary after your introduction. Why? Because your summary, those are different interesting points, right? Different changes, which I will talk about in a second, right? And your body part, where you will include different numbers, they will support those changes. So it makes more sense first to talk about the changes and then support them, right, rather than vice versa, okay? So this structure would definitely bring you more points in terms of your coherence and logic. Those are the main criteria, right, in your writing task 1, right, in general, in your writing section. So let's try to understand how to approach your overview or your summary in writing task 1. So what do you need to do there? First of all, as I said, you need to highlight the main points, right? And usually those main points, they will be very, very noticeable, very obvious, right, from your graph. Usually they are presented in a sense of trends. So for example, you can see that definitely the line is growing. So this is an upward trend, right? You see the situation, the tendency is definitely developing in an increasing, growing way, right? Or sometimes there might be different changes. As I mentioned already with maps, right? They might present you something what happened in the past, right? And something what's happening now currently, right? And it means that you need to kind of summarize those main changes, right? So those main changes, they will be really striking, like you won't be able to kind of pass them, okay? So please make sure that you describe them, right, in this particular paragraph, okay? So the vocabulary which you might definitely apply here would be trends, tendencies, changes as well, and that's perfectly fine. But anyways, in my sample, I will show you, you know, better vocabulary options you might use. Now, one of the most important strategies and rules which you need to apply in your summary paragraph is that you are not allowed to put any figures, numbers, percentages in your summary, right? So as I mentioned, you just need to summarize and describe the main changes, the most remarkable points, right? Tendencies, trends. And only after you did that, you would be able to get a chance in your body part to support those changes, right? Those points with figures. So in case if you include any figures or numbers in your summary, your score is going to be lowered. So please make sure that you never do that, okay? And that's why if you have a look at my example, which I kind of randomly provide here, is that there are no figures, no numbers, nothing like that. I'm just trying my best to describe different changes, okay? Now let's talk about the way how to do that in terms of your language. I always recommend my students to start every single paragraph, right, from specific transition structures or linking structures, words, which help the examiner to understand the agenda of your paragraph. So it's very clear, right, what to expect, okay? That's why once the introduction is done, it would be definitely great if you start from, for example, this sort of a structure, linking structure, your summary paragraph. Overall, what stands out from, it's a great transition structure. First of all, it gives you many words in case if you're struggling with describing analytical information, right? In order to reach at least 150 words, as I mentioned in the beginning of the session. Second of all, it's a great structure which shows that now you're going to get into your summary. You want to kind of summarize some sort of information, okay? And the examiner is ready for it, okay? And it helps you, to keep the logic and your thoughts quite coherently. So check, 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 right, to use this structure. So after you mentioned this, right, you definitely need to, again, kind of get back to, so stands out from where, right? Of course, from the graph which was given to you. I'm trying to be specific. I'm saying pie charts, right? But then you can see that I'm highlighting for you the words which help me explain those key changes or those key points, right, which are very, very different from the rest of the information. And for example, here I'm using the word dominant, right, that the dominant source where the income came from was the donated food. So you see, I'm just like trying to say that dominant, meaning that like obviously there were like the highest probably percentages or something like that there, right? So I'm trying to describe that, okay? It would be very remarkable in your graph. So that's why you do not need to worry about that. But in terms of your language, you need to prove that. And that's why I'm using the word dominant. Or for example, here, you can see that I'm saying, while the main realm where the highest proportion of money spent. Again, you see that by the superlative form, the highest proportion. I'm showing this very interesting point, right, which is very obvious in my pie chart, right? Basically, you see that my paragraph here consists of 2 sentences, and I will explain why. Ideally, your summary should include at least 2 key points, okay? This is very important. 1 point is not really enough for a good score. I would really recommend you to stick to at least 2 or 3 if it's possible, right? If it's not possible, then 2 is definitely perfect, okay? So how am I moving to my second point? Again, I'm using another transition. And you can see on the slide that I'm highlighted the next a transition structure. Another noticeable point is that, right? Again, great transition structure helps understand that, well, basically I'm done with my first point, I'm getting to another one, and I'm very analytical and concise, clear with that, right? And the second of all, of course, it's also a very beautiful academic structure, noticeable. It's a beautiful academic word, right? And again, it consists of many words, which helps you reach the minimum, right, of 150. Okay, but again, you see that I'm saying the total number of annual profits slightly outweigh the total number of expenses. So you see by the word total number and then outweigh, slightly outweigh, I show this very interesting point, right? And that's basically it. So you see, I never apply any figures here. I'm trying my best to use the vocabulary to describe those key points, okay? This is the way how your summary works, and please make sure that it's a quite concise and clear paragraph, right? And you should make sure that you identify those key points and summarize them well, because this paragraph gives you really good points for your logic, right? For your coherence, okay? And for the entire structure in general, okay? So please take it seriously, right? Let's move on to our body part, okay? And the body part is going to ideally consist of 2 paragraphs in writing task 1. It is possible to write only 1 paragraph in case if maybe your writing skills are not really advanced, and maybe your handwriting, like your writing skills are not very fast, right? So you're struggling with this. So 1 paragraph is okay, but ideally, to get a really high score, you need to write 2 paragraphs in your body part. And I will explain why it gives you more points. Because if you are able to write 2 paragraphs, it means that you are able to classify and categorize the information properly. And it brings you more points for your structure. It brings you more points for your logic and coherence again, all right? So let's try to understand what is a body paragraph, right? What do you need to do there? Well, as I mentioned in the summary, once you've finished with summarizing the key points, you need to support them, right? And how to support them, of course, to identify details now. And those details are figures, numbers, percentages, which are given to you, okay, in your graph. That's why it's very important to make sure that you include numbers in your body part. If you never do it and you just describe, that's also considered to be as a very rude mistake. So what we need to remember is that summary never includes any numbers, while your body part definitely includes them. And that's very important. Let's move on to the next strategy right here. So when I mentioned the idea of classifying or categorizing information, I'm trying to say that ideally it would be better to divide your body paragraphs into 2 parts, right? Where in the first body paragraph, you would be able to describe, let's say, similarities, some similar points, right? The same points kind of happening maybe within different periods of time, right? Suggested in your graph, right? While in another body paragraph, you would be able to put some contrast ideas, which very differ, right, from the ideas which you indicated in your previous paragraph. This helps the examiner to understand that you are able to categorize information very well, analyze it, see where there are similar points, where points differ pretty much, right? And it gives you a lot of points for your coherence, okay? That's why for advanced score, right, you definitely need to write 2 paragraphs versus 1, okay? Sometimes, as I already mentioned, they provide you with a tricky graph, and it might be, for example, a case that you just don't have any similarities, okay? Or maybe contrast ideas, but just like random information. But you have maybe multiple graphs. In this case, I would recommend you to write 1 paragraph about 1 graph, right? And then describe details in your second paragraph about the second visual graph, right? So that's how it works as well. But yet again, you kind of provide the idea of categorizing information. So you don't combine, let's say, a pie chart with a table, right? You describe them separately and you do it in 2 separate body paragraphs, okay? So this is another approach, right? Or for example, with maps, right? Remember I mentioned that you might have a map in the past, right? And current map. So either let's say maybe contrast in those maps, right? So it would make more sense to describe first the first map, right? And then in your second paragraph, the second map. So you don't combine it pretty much, okay? Unless you compare them, right? But still, then it's going to be similarities and contrast ideas, which would definitely help you. Let's try to understand what kind of linking structures we're going to use here and what kind of language we need to use here. Again, in order to show to the examiner that this is a new paragraph, right, like a body part of your essay, I will start from something which indicates that. And my first body paragraph would start from looking at the details. By this, I'm literally showing to the examiner that, oh, look, this is my body part. I finished with summarizing points, and now I'm ready to support those summarized points, okay? After you did that, you need to make sure that you connect, right, your information, your pieces of information, right, with your units, right? What do I mean by this? My piece of information is, let's say, the number of Chinese native speakers, right? And how to connect it, you need to use a verb, let's say accounted for, or to be, like I'm using here, for example, right? Sometimes it might be estimate, comprise of, Again, I will show you more options in a second in my sample, okay? But account for is a really good one and a very typical one to connect this piece of information, right, with my unit. And my unit is 900 million, right? Please make sure that you check in your graph the units being used. For example, here, my native speakers are measured in millions, okay? So it's very important, because if you mess up with your units, it means that this is a factual mistake because it was provided to you in your graph. So please make sure that you take it seriously as well. Well, grammatically, right, you can see that I'm trying to connect it with relative clauses, right? And then I'm changing my structure from account for. I'm moving to just to be, which is fine. You need to show the diverse structures, right? But what am I doing next? Next, I'm trying to show you that my first body paragraph is about similarities. So how to identify that? You need to use the transition structures, linking structures. And here I'm showing to you two options how to do that. Similarly, comma, and then you might get into the next similar point, right? Or if you are not familiar with similarly, you might use likewise. Again, likewise, comma, and then you get to the similar point, to another similar point, right? These linking words help you to show to the examiner that, look, I know how to categorize similar information, and I'm using specific linking structures in English for that, okay? So please make sure that you do that. And this is it. This is my first paragraph, but this is just a random sample to show you how it works, right? Next. My second body paragraph, you see that I start literally from a linking structure, which proves that I'm getting to my contrast ideas. And by contrast, it's a very good linking structure to start from. You might use here by contrast, in contrast, on the contrary, despite, right? Or what else? You might use conversely, right? So there are plenty of different contrast structures, right? Next, after you did that, of course, you get into the description, right, again, of those details. And that's exactly what I'm doing. You see, I'm trying to show more comparative structures, for example, relatively few, right? So it shows that, well, this is a contrast, right, for sure. Or another interesting way how we can deal with the describing details, right, is to trying to explain yourself. That's why I highlighted for you the structure this meant, right? This meant it's a very neutral structure in English, which you can use in describing graphs to kind of explain yourself. Like what do you mean, for example, by what you have just described, right? Like I provided those units, right? But what am I trying to say by this, right? I'm trying to explain that this meant that English was spoken by 940 million people in total, right? So I'm trying to kind of explain myself using different figures. That's a very interesting structure to do so. It's quite advanced and feel free to use it, right? It's a good one. That's basically it. So those are very general strategies which you might apply here, right? So as far as we already know how to do that, okay, I would like us to move on to the modal sample. So you can see practically how my strategies work, because maybe so far it seems quite difficult or maybe challenging for you. So let's imagine that right now we are in the examination room and you received this particular line graph, right, which is one of the most popular types of a graph you might receive. And that's exactly what I was talking about. You see that here, I'm not very lucky and I'm just provided with the graph, meaning that I definitely need to start my introductory paragraph from identifying that this is a line graph, okay? So that's exactly how my first strategy works, right? Okay, I identified that. Next, I'm checking my title, right? You see that your title is literally one sentence, right? As I promised. And it starts from shows data about blah, blah, blah. And then we have the topic, right? Well, obviously, if it's a line graph, it's not a kind of a picture or illustration, right, I would definitely apply here either highlights the data, right, or either shows the information, right? But they already use show and they use data, right? Meaning that I definitely need to change it and paraphrase it, right? So that's why if you have a look, for example, at my introduction, you can see that I'm literally saying the line graph, I identified it, then highlights the information. So I'm replacing show with highlight, right? And I'm replacing data with information, okay? So it's clear that it's paraphrased, right? I'm applying the strategy here. Next, let me get back, right, to the graph itself. Here you can see that the topic is the annual earnings of 3 bakeries in London, right? And then they give you the time frame, right? So my task is to paraphrase it. Okay, great. So how to do that, right? If we get to, my introduction, you can see that I'm not trying to talk about earnings, right? I'm trying to think, what are earnings, right? Earnings are definitely the amount of money, right? And that's why I'm trying to paraphrase it, okay? And I'm saying that the information about the amount of money, and then I'm trying to describe what kind of amount of money. And in order to do that, I'm showing my grammar knowledge about relative clauses. And I'm saying which was earned by 3 bakeries in London, right? So please pay attention to the way how I paraphrase it. But this is not it, right? It's very important to make sure that you include the time frame, especially when it comes to our line graphs. Let me explain myself. The time frame is this part of your graph, this axis, right? Where you can see that the time frame which you need to be focused on is from 2000 to 2010, right? But we should make sure that we place it in words very well, because we cannot keep it this way. That's very simple, and that doesn't prove your English level at all, right? So for this purpose, I'm trying to show you here how to deal with it, right? And I'm saying over a 10-year, because those are literally 10 years, we can calculate that, right? Period between 2000 and 2010. Please pay attention to this very beautiful structure. It will give you really good points in case if you get something with time, right? As in my case with this line graph. First of all, it shows your knowledge of how to build some sort of an adjective based on numbers, and that's exactly what I'm doing, right? And moreover, I'm trying to paraphrase them from to with between and that's a very interesting structure, and it's a very beautiful way how you can describe the time frame. Okay, I really recommend you to do it if you receive such a task. Okay, all right, so this is basically one sentence only, right? This is your title. You paraphrase it, you indicated your time frame, you identify the graph, and we are ready to move on to the next paragraph. And as I promised, our next paragraph is an overview or summary, right? I literally start from this linking structure, which I presented to you later. This is overall what stands out from the graph is, right? And after that, I'm trying my best to describe the most remarkable points, right? So what's really interesting here is that if you have a look at this graph, you can see that some of these lines, right, they definitely have the upward trend. That's how we call it in English, right? When something is literally increasing, right? And this is a tendency because you can see throughout the period of time, right? So how to explain that in English? Please have a look at the slide again. And right here, I suggest to you the way how we say it in English, that there were considerable. Considerable means like very remarkable. You literally can see that, right? And you could see that in the graph. Considerable upward trends, right? Where in the income of both Bernie's Bond and Roby's Baker. Those are the names of those bakeries. By the way, if we get back here, you can see that they are provided to you, okay? And it would be really great if you use those names because those are facts and you are able to use them. Okay, then I'm trying to show that even though two of those bakeries had upward trends, there was the third bakery, and that third bakery obviously didn't have any sort of increase in its income, right? And that's why I'm using this structure while. While will help me to show the fact that oh, look, at the same time we have 3 bakeries, but 2 of them are kind of increasing in their income while at the same time, right? Another one is not. So that's why it's a very good grammar structure to use here. And then I'm saying that the earnings of Lovely Loaves saw a considerable fall or significant fall, you can always say that, over the period. So please pay attention that I'm trying to show that, look, 2 of those bakeries are very different from the third one. And that's a remarkable point. And I'm describing it with words, right? Upward trends, fall, considerable fall as an adjective, right? And as a noun, right? So I'll never use any figures here as I promised. One more interesting fact is that you see that usually we use the verb see or saw because it's past simple tense, right? If you don't know the structure, you can always say experience. For example, the earnings of Lovely Loaves experienced a considerable or significant fall over the period, okay? That's also correct, and that's also a very good structure to use instead of see, right? See is also great though. You see that I'm done with my first point, and I kind of combined sort of 2 points, very interesting points in one sentence because I used the grammar structure while. And now I'm ready to move on to another one, and I'm using, as I promised, the structure. Another noticeable point is, right? So what is that, right? I'm trying to, with assistance of, again, superlatives, right? I'm saying that the Lovely Loaves was the most popular bakery in 2000, but in 2010, Roby's Bakery earned more money than others. What do I mean by this? If we get back here, right? So you see that I'm literally kind of trying to start from here, right? I'm trying to show that, oh, wow. So the blue line, which is Lovely Loaves, was the best, right? In the beginning of this time frame, right? But if we check kind of the end of this period of time, obviously the best one was not Lovely Loaves at all. For some reasons, it literally decreased. That's very remarkable, right? But we can see that this one, or Roby's Bakery, right, is definitely doing way better, right? And I'm trying to show this contrast, okay? And I'm describing that with the word popular, right? That's also fine because I cannot still support it with my figures because it's my summary. So I'm using the word popular for that, right? This is another way how you can do that. So please pay attention that the only thing I'm indicating here is years. That's important. And you can, by the way, do that, right? Because by this, you prove the facts, right? And that's the way how we finish this summary part, okay? That's it. So you see 2 complex sentences, 2, even 3, I would say here, remarkable points were described, and I'm ready to move on to my body paragraphs, okay? And obviously, there is so much data here, so you definitely can categorize it in similarities and contrasts, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's why right here, you can see my first body paragraph where I'm going to describe similarities, and you will see the highlighted vocabulary, how we can do that. Again, as I promised, I start from my linking structure that proves that this is my body part. And right now I'm ready to describe details. Looking at the details, great, comma. But then I use a very good structure as regards. Why am I using it? I'm using it because, well, guys, you have 3 bakeries. and you need to kind of show to the examiner that now you're talking about this bakery, then you're talking about this one. So as regards means, well, now I'm kind of going to talk about Bernie's buns, okay? And this is a very academic linking structure, right? Which helps you express this point that it's about Bernie's buns, okay? It's beautiful because it's great for academic writing, and I really encourage you to use it, okay? Now, as I promised, you need to get into numbers, figures, right? Well, remember I mentioned that you need to connect the pieces of information with the units. So the first thing I'm doing here is that I'm checking my units. So we have years here, okay, that's clear. But here we have income, and my income is measured in currency, which is pounds, okay? So you should make sure that those are pounds you are talking about. So you are not making any factual mistake, okay? All right, so we figured that, and right now I'm trying to connect it. So I'm saying income, for example, started at 20,000 pounds in 2000. So if you have a line graphs, right? So lines would definitely start and finish with something. So start at, and then your number is a great structure to use in order to describe how the attendance starts, right? Then you can see that in order to make my sentences complex, I'm connecting them with different short linking structures as then. Also later I will use after, right? This is just for the coherence because that's too much data provided. So I need to make sure that I connected well. Next, I'm saying there was a fluctuation over the next 3 years, right? What does that mean? I'm literally following, right? Myself with the lines, okay? So fluctuation means that there were many changes, okay? And I'm trying to use this word to prove to the examiner that I understand that there were changes. So the income was not actually stable, right? Now, I'm trying to prove it with numbers, okay? And I'm saying, you see that I kind of stated the fact that there was a fluctuation, now I'm proving it. At which point it leveled off at just under 40,000 pounds until 2006. So I'm saying that, look, there were kind of changes, right? And it was not very stable, but then when it comes to 40,000 pounds, specifically in 2006, right? It leveled off. Level off means that it became kind of stable, right? Level off, it's a very beautiful verb to use. And you see that you can connect this verb with at and then your unit of information. And that's exactly what I'm doing here, right? So visually, if we get back to Bernie Barnes, right? This is the green line. You see that I'm following my line. So I'm saying that you see there was a fluctuation, right? But then it leveled off. This period until 2006, right? It leveled off, so it became stable. And it became stable at some point, which was 40,000. And that's exactly what I had just described, okay? So I started from describing this part, but I did it quite shortly with saying there was a fluctuation, but I'm trying to pay more attention to this because it's longer, right? And I can see 40,000, I can see that it leveled off. I have my vocabulary to explain that, okay? Next, I'm using them, right? So as I said, it's just for the coherence, and I'm saying the figure rose significantly. This is a very beautiful structure to use a verb and an adverb to describe the changes, right? What's going on. So rose, this is rise, right? But just in past simple, right? Because we know that it happened in 2010. That's why I use past simple tense here. So I still need to prove this rise, significant rise, right? How? I'm saying finishing at around £65,000 in 2010. So let's get back, right? So you understand it. So that's exactly what I'm talking about here. You see that from this leveled off situation, which I described, you see that it literally rose significantly from 40,000 to 65 almost, or 64, it doesn't matter. So of course they won't charge you for the approximate numbers. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so if you believe that it's 64 but not 65, that's okay. But you need to describe this. And what I'm trying to say, you see that I literally started from describing my line from the beginning right here, then I put some attention right there, and then I describe the final part with details, okay? And that's exactly what you need to do as well when it comes to line graphs. Make sure that you follow your line and you describe the most, of course, remarkable, right, parts of this line. And so you can support it with figures, right? And you have time to do that. So you cannot, describe every single part because, of course, you don't have enough time for this, right? So I'm trying to do my best to describe the most remarkable parts of this line. Yes. Next, let's move on, right? And of course, I need to show the fact that I'm describing similarities here, right? And this is another way how you can do it. You can literally say the trend was similar, right? You can build a sentence like this, and this is fine, right? So if you forgot, for example, similarly or likewise, you can always build a sentence like this. The trend was similar. And this is another option how you can talk about similarities. Next, I'm trying to get into those similar points, right? I still have to prove them and describe them. So I'm saying having remained stable. Remain means, again, stay, right? Stay stable, steady, or level off. The same vocabulary, right? Just different options how we describe it. And then, again, at approximately £55,000 in the first half of the decade, right? Guys, make sure that you use approximately, about, around. All those options are really good to kind of prove the fact that, well, those are not the exact numbers because you cannot really see them, right? It's just a graph, right? It's not like some sort of a statistics instrument or tool you use to be very exact, right? So make sure that you use this in English. You see that I'm using approximately, then I'm trying to show the fact that my vocabulary is diverse and I'm using around. So just keep playing with that, right? Then you see that, again, I'm following another line, another bakery, right? And I described that it was stable, then the income grew sharply. Again, you see that I'm using the structure of a verb and adverb, right? And again, I'm proving it with my numbers, reaching nearly £100,000 in 2008. Make sure that if you have years, you connect it with years, as I'm doing right here, for example, right? Okay, I can just quickly come back to Robbie's Bakery, right? That's what I'm explaining. So you see, this is a very long, stable line. And that's why I was saying that it remained stable, right? For a while, kind of. And that's why I used having remained stable, present kind of perfect, right? But then I definitely described this rise as something really sharp. Okay, that's definitely sharper than the green line, obviously. And that's why I'm using this vocabulary to prove it. Okay, and of course, I'm playing with my numbers. You see, it's like approximately 100,000, something like that. Okay, and I use those details in my paragraph as well. Okay, next, what else I wanted to say here is that you see that I finished my paragraph with another grammar structure. So if here I was using a verb and an adverb, here I'm trying to show to the examiner that I'm able to arrange an adjective and a noun. So I'm saying then there was a gradual rise to around 105 pounds in 2010. So this is another grammar structure. Please make sure that you play with it and you show not only your capability to use a verb and an adverb, but also an adjective and a noun. Okay, it shows the diversity of your vocabulary, and it gives you more points for this. Okay, yeah, that's basically it. We finished the similarities, and very quick, we are getting into the contrast ideas, right? And this is my second body paragraph. I start from the linking structure as I promised, by contrast, so it's clear to the examiner that this is something different, right? And I'm saying that the income went in the opposite direction. And by this, I'm proving, right, that this is a very contrast idea. And then I'm trying to prove that, right, with my numbers. For example, if in my previous paragraph, I said there was a fluctuation is a noun. Here, I'm trying to say that earnings fluctuated. So I use a verb, fluctuate, okay? Around, well, I use approximately, about, so why not to use around right here, okay? Again, I'm getting into details. Then after that, well, as I promised, you need to use some sort of coherent structures. Then after all, after that, right, they are really good. Or finally, right, lastly, those are good linking structures to connect your sentences. I'm using a very beautiful contrast structure, despite. Please make sure that after despite, you need to use a noun structure or ing form. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Despite falling sharply to just over 40,000 pounds in 2008, right? So this is a contrast idea, right? Apart from starting from a contrast transition, I also use this contrast linking words to prove with data that it's really like that. Then I'm saying that the figure leveled off, right? Again, I'm using a verb, right? And I'm just trying to kind of show different structures right here with my vocabulary. Okay, and that's basically it. That's it. I'm really sorry it took me a while to explain it, but I just want to make sure that you understand how to use the diverse vocabulary, how to explain the lines, right? Because they might be challenging sometimes. So when it comes to line graphs, let's resume it, right? Just follow the line and try your best to explain some very interesting parts of those lines, okay? And prove that with data. Okay, all right, so we'll take some time to look at the comments and maybe answer your questions right now. Okay, how could a paragraph consist of only one sentence? Isn't it wrong and will lose points for inappropriate paragraphing? No, it's not, because your title consists literally of one sentence only, right? So what else are you going to include there? It's given to you, right? So you cannot change it or include any extra information. Otherwise, it's going to be a factual mistake. All right. So please make sure that in your introduction, you just paraphrase the title which was given to you. And usually it's only one sentence. So it's not a mistake. You cannot include in your introduction anything else apart from the title itself. Okay. No summarizing points, okay, no details, nothing like that. So just paraphrase title, and that's why it is one sentence. What grade is this? 10th? I'm sorry, I'm not really sure what this question means. It would be great if you could clarify yourself. I'm not sure, what do you mean by the word grade in 10th? When it comes to the score, we have in IELTS, right? We have bands starting from you know, like 0 until 9, right? So I'm not sure what you mean by 10th. It would be great if you could clarify it if you want to. Great. Okay. So, any other comments or questions? All right, so it seems that's none, right? I hope, guys, that it was helpful to you, right? And you would be able to apply the strategies, right? And this vocabulary to your real task, which you're going to receive in your IELTS test, right? And I wish you good luck with your test and all the best. Thank you so much. Have a great day.